Bernie Sanders, born September 8th, 1941, Brooklyn, New York. He's 77 years old. He is running for president. This is his second time around at running for president. He's running as he's an independent in Vermont. He caucuses with the Democrats in the Senate, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think he technically has to be a Democrat to run as a Democratic candidate. It's not really clear, but I believe he's running. I mean, he is running as a Democrat. He would be on the Democratic ticket. I'm just not sure of the technicalities there, how all that works. Sanders is a graduate of the University of Chicago. He got into politics he got into politics in the 70s and lost, I think, in a couple of elections. Eventually was elected mayor of Burlington, Vermont for 3 terms. Then he was elected to Congress as a congressperson for a number of years. And then in 2007, he was elected to the Senate, and he has been there ever since. Now, Sanders was very active for about 3 years while he was at university in Chicago. He even was arrested at a protest and fined $25 for the deed. He marched on Washington. He was a leader in the movement while at the University of Chicago. There is this debate, I guess, out there a little bit about whether Sanders is really that much of a civil rights warrior, and what has Sanders done since then. And I think part of the problem here comes from really just a lack of understanding of what Bernie kind of believes in and his civil rights stand, but also that Sanders supporters, they call themselves economic progressives for the most part. This is my understanding. They think of themselves as progressive on economic issues, and they don't necessarily ascribe to the progressive ideal in terms of social justice or racial equity. So that I think, and this is something that I think happens with millennials, is they don't see the social justice, racial equity issues in the same way as people from a different era do. And I think they think those things are solved, those things are fixed. And of course, being that I work in that area and that I've been an activist most of my life, I certainly see it differently than they do. But I think that is probably where the main disconnect is that it's just not that big of a deal to his supporters whether he's been involved in civil rights, and continues to be involved in civil rights. If you know something different, let me know in the comments. Those of you who watch my live stream know I love Bernie's policies a lot. I talk about it. I talk about his policies. I talk about what he has done for the left, what he's done for the Democratic Party, and I like him. I like his issues. I like his issues a lot. However, I don't find him personally appealing. I don't like his personality or his seeming inability to connect with everyday Americans. I don't like that. I think that's a problem. His base loves him. They adore him. They seem to truly believe in his mission, and I find that exciting. It's awesome. It's admirable. It's a great thing. But not being able to connect with the American people in general, it's just going to be problematic if you want to be elected president of the United States. And as I've said it here already a couple of times, I want to like Bernie. I like what he stands for. But for some reason, personally, and I don't think I'm the only one here, I don't like him. I don't like Bernie. I like his policies, but I don't like him. And considering that I consider myself a hardcore leftist, I mean the kind of leftist that will come to the doors of the wealthy, will come to their houses with armed troops behind me and take their wealth from them and redistribute it. That's the kind of leftist I am. I should love Bernie. I should be working on his campaign. I should be making phone calls. I should be ringing doorbells for Bernie. I should be putting up yard signs for Bernie. So I just don't think that he's electable in this superficial era that we live in where, flash is valued over substance. And Bernie doesn't have that dynamic, John F. Kennedy kind of appeal. He doesn't come across that way. He's abrasive. He's caustic. That delivery is just not going to win over Americans. Like I said, this culture just isn't that deep. And this culture wants somebody that can really grab their attention. By the way, I don't call myself a progressive. As I said, I'm a leftist, and I think there are 4 categories that come to mind when it relates to the left. There's the center left, the liberal, the progressive, and the leftist, in that kind of order of, from barely being left to hardcore left. Sanders followers have a huge presence in social media. They're all over the place. They're on YouTube, they're on Twitter. They fight for Bernie every single day. But I don't see a big social media presence from the Sanders camp itself. And I'm not sure if Bernie doesn't get it, if his people don't get it, if he doesn't value it, so he doesn't push his people towards it. It's very confusing to me, because I know, AOC, who's crushing the social media thing, is close to Sanders, is close to the campaign. She gets it. Even Mike Gravel, he's got a very young campaign staff that's working with him. And they get it. They get the meme thing like stone cold. They have it down. They've got Instagram down. And for whatever reason, Bernie or his people just don't seem to have that. And I, in this era of not a lot of substance, I think that's important as well. And again, I don't want anybody to think that I'm not putting down Bernie here. These are just my personal feelings, because this is my show and this is what I want to talk about. What Bernie has done for the left is, again, it's monumental. He has pulled the party to the left, and I love it. Healthcare is a must. It has to be a right for every person in the country. Now, I'd prefer Medicaid for all, not just Medicare for all. But, I mean, that's a little bit of semantics, and there's a little bit of a difference in money that way. But it's great that we've moved in this direction. And shifting to a free or mostly free healthcare system, it's really not that difficult. It's really just where the money comes from, and then how it's spent. So if we can take the profit out of healthcare, and I mean doctors and nurses, they need to be paid well, and we still need to do research. But if we can take that gross amount of profit out of healthcare, and the money comes from the government instead of out of our pockets, because it's going to go back to the government in forms of taxes anyway. But the buying power of the government, I mean, it's Medicare for all is not that big of a deal. It's going to be hard to implement psychologically, but it's not really going to be that hard to implement overall. College for all, jobs for all, passing the Green New Deal. Bernie is a game changer. There's no doubt about it. And I'm trying to toot Bernie's horn here a little bit. Now, I have a theory why millennials in particular like Bernie, and it is really for the same reason that I do, that I like his policies. He wants to destroy the status quo, not rebuild the system, but create something new, something different, something better, something more equitable for everybody. Today's young people, though, they see both parties as evil, both parties having sold their soul to the corporate devil, to the corporate demon. They don't see a future for themselves. They see the boomers and the Gen Xers as selfish, greedy, dispassionate people who have left the world on the brink of destruction, who have really not set anything up for them to be able to thrive. They just see these greedy older people that have basically screwed up the planet and don't care about who's coming up behind them. And I mean, I honestly, I can't disagree with them. They have little hope and a lot of anger. And as I said, rightfully so, we do need a new system. Capitalism and the cult of the individual in the U.S. needs to go away forever. I mean, that's just bad news. It's just not good. This cult of the individual, this pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you don't have any bootstraps in the first place, when you don't have any boots, it's just ridiculous. But what scares me is that the millennials don't see Trump as much worse than corporate Democrats. They don't see the urgency in removing Trump from office like I do, and I think like people of my generation do. They see the doom and gloom, and they want to destroy the system. They don't see a future, and they need to, in their minds, upend the system to create something better. And again, I agree. My take, though, is that we must gain power in Washington first before we can upend the system. We must have a candidate that's electable, and I mean, I'm a hardcore leftist, but if that means having someone closer to the center to get Trump out of power, then we need to do that. Then, because we've seen a lot of success with organizations like the Justice Democrats, then we can vote out, we can primary those corporate Democrats, and we can vote them out. because the Democrats are going to be in power a long time. So if, I know Bernie's older, so the possibility of him running in 2024, maybe that he's going to be too old to do that. But we need to get, and I know it sounds lame, but we need to get just about anybody other than Trump in there. And then from that point forward, we can move to transforming the country and transforming the party. And I'll be honest, if Hillary had been elected, that would be what I would be pushing for. Because Hillary, she's a corporatist. She's a bought and sold kind of person, a bought and paid for kind of person. And the Justice Democrats and those groups, rightfully so, should have been going after her. But man, that we would still be in better shape had Hillary, and this is my opinion, had gotten elected and not Donald Trump. I will vote for Bernie in the general election if he is the nominee. But I'm just not sold on voting for him in the primaries. Leave your comments below, good or bad. I'm enjoying doing the show, and I've been enjoying your comments. And maybe you can convince me to become the biggest Bernie fan ever. Maybe you can convince me to vote for Bernie. Please leave me some comments. If I'm wrong on some of my assumptions, tell me what your perspective is. I really enjoy doing this show, and I'm glad you're watching. Please hit the subscribe button and click on the bell so you can get my latest show updates. I really, really appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next episode.